On February 1st, 2026, the funk world lost one of its true architects. Steve Washington passed away at the age of 67. And if you've ever moved your body to that raw, undeniable funk from the late 70s and early 80s, you owe something to this man. Steve wasn't just a musician. He was what his bandmates lovingly called the fearless leader. And trust me, that nickname was earned. Born in Newark, New Jersey, and raised in East Orange, Steve's path to funk royalty started early. At just 15 years old, he was already touring with his Uncle Ralph, Pee Wee Middlebrooks of the Ohio Players. Can you imagine? While most teenagers were figuring out high school, Steve was learning the ropes of professional musicianship from one of funk's legendary groups. But here's where it gets interesting. Steve didn't just ride along on someone else's coattails. In the mid-1970s, he co-founded Slave, a band that would go on to define an era of funk. As a trumpeter, keyboardist, and the creative force behind the group, Steve helped craft hits that are still sampled by hip-hop artists today. Slide, that 1977 #1 R&B hit, that was Steve and Slave. Just a touch of love, Watching You, Snapshot. These weren't just songs, they were movements on the dance floor. And when most people would have been satisfied with one successful band, Steve did it again. In 1981, he left Slave with 3 other members and formed Aura, taking funk in a sleeker, more groove-driven direction. The man literally created 2 legendary funk groups. How many artists can say that? Beyond his bands, Steve also worked with George Clinton's P-Funk world, contributing his expertise as a producer and player. His influence spread far and wide. What made Steve special wasn't just his technical skill on multiple instruments. It was his vision. He understood funk not as just a genre, but as a feeling, that blend of raw energy with sophisticated arrangements, of street-level grit with studio polish. Today, decades later, hip-hop producers still dig through Steve's work, sampling those grooves and introducing new generations to the glorious sounds of funk's golden era. Steve Washington may have left us, but every time someone dropped a needle on a Slave or Aura record, every time a producer samples that perfect bass line or horn section, Steve's there, still leading, still fearless, still making us move. Rest in power, fearless leader. The funk lives on through you. On February 2nd, 2026, the Mandarin pop world lost one of its most gifted creators. Yuan Wei Jian, affectionately known as Little Fat Teacher, passed away at the age of 57. He died peacefully at around 10 a.m. at Taidong McKay Memorial Hospital, finally free after years of suffering. Yuan's journey to this moment was heartbreaking. Back in 2018, while in Shanghai, he collapsed and suffered a brain hemorrhage. Doctors later discovered a brain tumor. He underwent surgery and fell into a coma for 62 days. When he finally woke up, it seemed like a miracle, but the struggles weren't over. In 2020, Yuan fell again, this time at his home in Taitung. He slipped back into a coma and had been bedridden ever since. For nearly 8 years, this brilliant musician who once filled the world with beautiful melodies couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't create. And on that Monday morning in February, surrounded by the warmth of those who loved him, he let go. But here's the thing about Yuan Wei Jian. His music never stopped living. You might not recognize his face, but I guarantee you've heard his work. Yuan was the man behind the love songs. He wrote for the biggest names in Mandarin pop: Fei Wong, Naing, Shi, Kai Chin, and so many others. Songs like Jingfu, Conquest for Naing, and tracks for Fei Wong's legendary albums. Those were Yuan's creations. In the early 90s, Yuan was actually a performer himself. As part of the duo Nobody with Mo Fan, he won Golden Melody Awards in 1993 and 1994. But then he made a choice. He stepped away from the spotlight and chose to work behind the scenes, crafting songs for others. And what a choice that was. During the golden era of Mandarin pop in the 90s and 2000s, Yuan helped define how an entire generation understood love, heartbreak, and longing. His melodies lived in karaoke rooms, on radio waves, in people's most private moments. Later, he became a judge on the singing competition 1 Million Star, where younger audiences came to know him as a gentle mentor, bridging the classic era with a new generation. His sister said it best. When people miss him, they can listen to his songs while driving, when sad, or when at peace. He is everywhere. And that's Yuan Wei Jin's gift to us. Though his body suffered and eventually failed, his music remains immortal. In every karaoke session, every heartbreak playlist, every moment someone sings along to a melody he created. Rest in peace, Little Fat Teacher. Your songs will keep singing long after we're all gone. Monday, February 2nd, 2026. Studio City, California. Surrounded by his family, Chuck Negrin took his last breath at the age of 83. After battling COPD for 3 decades and heart failure in his final months, the voice that once filled stadiums finally fell silent. But what a voice it was. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Come on, you're singing it right now, aren't you? That's Chuck. That's joy to the world. And if you've ever felt pure, uncomplicated happiness from a song, you felt Chuck Negrin's gift. Born Charles Negrin II in the Bronx on June 8th, 1942, Chuck grew up doing 2 things: playing basketball and singing doo-wop under streetlights. His athletic skills earned him a scholarship to California State University in Los Angeles, and that's where everything changed. The kid from the Bronx moved west, and instead of just playing ball, he started playing the music game. In 1967, Chuck joined forces with Danny Hutton and Corey Wells to form Three Dog Night. Think about this. They became one of the biggest bands of the late 60s and early 70s. Not just popular, huge. They sold 60 million records, gold records everywhere. #1 hits that still get played today. Chuck's lead vocals powered songs you absolutely know. Joy to the World, One. Yeah, One is the loneliest number. Easy Be Hard, an old-fashioned love song. The Show Must Go On. Every single one of those, that was Chuck's voice leading the way. But here's where Chuck's story gets real. Fame hit hard and fast, and Chuck fell even harder. Heroin addiction. He spent his entire fortune on drugs. At his lowest point, this man who once performed at Carnegie Hall was homeless on Los Angeles' Skid Row. 30 rehab attempts. 30. Most people would have given up. But in 1991, Chuck finally broke free. He got clean, and then, here's the beautiful part, he launched his solo career. 7 albums between 1995 and 2017. He wrote a book, Three Dog Nightmare, laying it all bare, the glory, the fall, the redemption. And just 5 months ago, something incredible happened. After decades of not speaking, Chuck and Danny Hutton reconciled. They hugged. They made peace. Danny later said, "It was wonderful. It was a great relief to get that burden. It's not healthy to keep that anger." Chuck performed for years while battling COPD, until COVID made it too dangerous to continue. What will we remember Chuck Negrin for? Joy, literally and figuratively. His voice carried this energy that made you want to sing along, dance, and just feel good, but also resilience. The man fell to the absolute bottom and clawed his way back up, not just to survive, but to thrive. Chuck is survived by his wife, Ami, 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and millions of fans who will never forget that voice. Rest in power. Chuck, the show must go on, and it will, because you taught us how. Saturday morning, February 7th, 2026. Brad Arnold, surrounded by his wife Jennifer and his family, passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was only 47 years old. 9 months after announcing his stage for kidney cancer diagnosis, the voice of a generation finally fell silent. But what a voice it was. Born September 27, 1978, in Escatawpa, Mississippi, Brad was just a kid sitting in math class when lightning struck. At 15 years old, bored out of his mind while his teacher droned on about equations, Brad scribbled down some lyrics. Those lyrics? Kryptonite. Think about that. A teenager, sitting in math class, wrote one of the defining rock songs of the 2000s. That song has been streamed over 1 billion times on Spotify. It hit number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. And it all started with a bored kid and a notebook. In 1996, Brad and his buddies Todd Harrell and Matt Roberts formed Three Doors Down right there in Mississippi. Brad wasn't just a lead singer. He was the original drummer too. He literally sang and drummed at the same time. Talk about multitasking. When they released their debut album, The Better Life, in 2000, it went 7 times platinum. 7 times. Their next 3 albums, all platinum. Here Without You, When I'm Gone, It's Not My Time. These weren't just songs. They were anthems for anyone who'd ever felt lost, left behind, or searching for something more. Brad's lyrics hit different because they came from somewhere real. He wrote about everyday struggles, about faith, about hoping things would get better. His music became what people turned to when life got hard. In May 2025, Brad posted a video that broke millions of hearts. "Got some not so good news for you today," he said, with that same honest, direct approach he always had. Clear cell renal carcinoma, kidney cancer that had metastasized to his lungs. Stage 4. The summer tour was canceled. But even facing death, Brad stayed true to himself. "I'd love for you to lift me up in prayer every chance you get," he said. Then, with a hint of that Brad Arnold humor, "It's time for me to go listen to Not My Time a little bit, right?" He fought for 9 months. 9 months of courage, of faith, of holding on to hope. Brad was more than just a rock star. He was a devoted Christian who preached his faith during concerts. He was a husband who adored Jennifer. He was humble, kind, generous, the kind of guy who remembered where he came from and never forgot the people who got him there. He was the only member who stayed with 3 doors down from day one to the very end. The longest tenured member, the heart and soul. What will we remember Brad Arnold for? That raw, gravelly voice that made you believe every word. The kid from Mississippi who wrote Kryptonite in math class and changed rock music forever. The man who turned pain into poetry, who gave us songs to hold on to when we had nothing else. Rest in peace, Brad. You weren't just a singer. You were our voice when we couldn't find our own. And no, Brad, it wasn't your time. But thank you for every moment you gave us. Thursday, February 5th, 2026. The music world lost Fred Smith at 77 years old. After fighting an illness long and hard for several years, the bassist who helped shape one of punk's most influential albums finally rested. Fred's story is a story of New York City in the mid-1970s, raw, electric, and constantly reinventing itself. Born April 10th, 1948, Fred started out as the original bassist for a band called Angel and the Snake. That band went through some name changes, Blondie and the Bonsai Babies, and eventually just Blondie. Yeah, that Blondie. Fred was there at the very beginning with Debbie Harry and Chris Stein. But on March 7th, 1975, Fred made a decision that would change music history. Television needed a bassist. Richard Hell had just left after butting heads with Tom Verlaine. And Fred, looking at his options, famously said, "Blondie was like a sinking ship and television was my favorite band." So he jumped ship, best decision he ever made. In 1977, television released Marquee Moon. If you know anything about punk or post-punk or alternative rock, you know this album. It's not just influential, it's foundational. Rolling Stone called it one of the greatest albums of all time. And while everyone talks about Tom Verlaine's guitar work, Fred's bass was the backbone, the anchor, the thing that held it all together. Here's what made Fred special. He wasn't flashy. He didn't need to be. His bandmate Jimmy Rip, who played alongside Fred for 46 years, put it perfectly. He was a natural, never flashy, always essential, always serving the song in ways that only the greatest musicians can. That's Fred Smith in a nutshell. Melodic bass lines, counterpoint, subtle, dry humor, essential. When television broke up in 1978, Fred didn't just disappear. He played on solo albums for both Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd. He worked with the Roaches, Willie Nile, the Fleshtones, always that reliable, essential presence. In 1992, when television reunited, Fred was right there. And he stayed with them through sporadic tours for the next 3 decades, right up until Tom Verlaine's death in 2023. But here's a beautiful twist of Fred's story. In 1999, he and his wife Paula Seragino started making wine in their East Village apartment. By 2007, they had established Seragino Smith, an artisanal winery upstate in Bloomington, New York. The punk rocker became a winemaker. How perfect is that? Jimmy Rip said they had big plans to play Tom Verlaine's music live this year, as a tribute. But it wasn't meant to be. Thankfully, Jimmy got to say goodbye. Their last words to each other? Love you. Fred Smith wasn't the loudest guy in the room. He wasn't the flashiest. But he was exactly what great music needs. Someone who served the song, who makes everyone around him better, who understands that sometimes the most important thing you can do is hold it all together. Rest easy, Fred. Your bass lines will echo forever. Saturday, February 7th, 2026. Greg Brown, founding Guitars of Cake, passed away at 56 years old after a brief illness. And if you've ever felt that surge of energy from the distance, you felt Greg's genius. Reluctantly crouched at the starting line. That's Greg. That entire song, he wrote it. The propulsive rhythm, the deadpan delivery, that guitar riff that just drives forward. All Greg Brown. Born and raised in Sacramento, California, Greg co-founded Cake in 1991 alongside singer John McCrae, trumpeter Vince DiFiore, and others. They weren't trying to sound like anyone else. They were trying to sound like Sacramento, gritty, honest, a little weird, totally unique. Greg's guitar playing was nothing like the flashy solos dominating rock radio in the 90s. It was restrained, rhythmic, smart. John McCrae said it perfectly. Greg would do things with his guitar that would square things up rhythmically in a way that was really, really smart. Greg played guitar and keyboards on Cake's first two albums, Motorcade of Generosity in 1994 and Fashion Nugget in 1996. These albums defined Cake's sound. Stripped down, groove-oriented, alternative rock with a trumpet. And then came The Distance. Greg was a soul writer when he first showed it to the band. Even he didn't think it would be the hit. But the song exploded. Heavy rotation on MTV and alternative radio. Fashion Nugget went platinum. Suddenly, Cake was everywhere. Here's a cool fact. The Distance is used to kick off the California International Marathon every single year. Thousands of runners pushing themselves to go the distance. Greg's song, literally fueling people to keep moving forward. In 1997, Greg left Cake and formed Death Ray. He also collaborated with Weezer members Rivers Cuomo and Matt Sharp on side projects, always creating, always exploring. In 2011, Greg reunited with Cake to play guitar on Bound Away. And in 2023, he released a solo EP, The End of Something New. Even at the end, Greg was still making something new. His daughter, Adri, said it best. The best that I could have asked for. Matt Sharp wrote a beautiful tribute about their partnership having a lifetime's worth of love, tenderness, and heartbreak. What will we remember Greg Brown for? That he invented a guitar sound and style like no other. That he understood groove matters more than flash. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could do is hold back, create space, and let the rhythm do the talking. Every time someone starts a marathon, every time The Distance plays, Greg's there, still driving us forward. Rest in power, Greg. You went the distance. February 2026. The soul music world said goodbye to Garland Green at the age of 83. And if you've ever heard Jealous Kind of Fella, you know exactly what the world just lost, a voice that could make you feel every crack, every ache, every truth. Born Garfield Green Jr. on June 14, 1942, in tiny Dunleith, Mississippi, Garland was the 10th of 11 children. In 1958, at just 16, he moved to Chicago, chasing something bigger than the Delta could offer. Young Garland worked to pay his way through Englewood High School, singing on weekends for extra cash. One day, singing in a pool room, barbecue chain owner R.J. Collins overheard him. Collins was so moved, he agreed to pay for Garland's education at the Chicago Conservatory of Music. A pool room led to the conservatory. That's talent. In 1967, Garland won a talent show at the Trocadero Theater, opening for Lou Rawls and Earl Hines. In the audience were Mel and Joshy Joe Armstead, who set up his first recording session in Detroit. Then came 1969, Jealous Kind of Fella. This wasn't just a hit. This was soul music at its most exposed, most vulnerable. Garland's voice carried this pleading, desperate honesty you can't fake. The song hit number 5 on the Billboard R&B chart, sold 1 million copies, and went gold certified. An instant classic. That was his only major national hit. But Garland kept going. Atlantic Records, RCA, working with Donny Hathaway on Plain and Simple Girl. In 2012, at age 70, he released I Should Have Been the One. After 29 years without a full album, still had those vocal chops, that emotional power. What made Garland Green special wasn't chart success, it was authenticity. His voice came straight from the church, from Mississippi, from real life. Every crack in his voice told the story as clearly as the lyrics. Garland Green never became a household name, but Jealous Kind of Fella remains a cornerstone of deep soul. And everyone who knows, knows. Rest in power, Garland. You gave us soul at its most honest, and that truth lives forever.